Hola muchachos, ¿qué tal? Buenos días. Aquí tienen el horario para hoy, miércoles el 13 de noviembre. Learning target for today is to demonstrate mastery of both regular and irregular verb conjugations in the subjunctive with expressions of emotion, such as your warm-up question. ¿Cómo se dice I hope you're doing well en español? I hope would be the verb esperar. Esperar in the yo form. Yo espero. And then in between the subject in your main clause and the subject in your subordinate clause would be que. And then to be, you are doing well. This would be the verb. I guess I hope you are well. Could do without the doing, even though we would include that in English. So I hope you are well. The verb to be is estar in terms of how you feel, right? The verb estar. And then well is bien. Espero que estés muy bien. Very well. I guess let's change that really quickly in real time. Just a pet peeve of mine. I hope you are very well. Now we're good. Now we have a direct translation. Okay. Sorry about that. The rest of the agenda. Let's get to that. So no homework was due for, or actually there was an assignment due for today, the subjunctive irregular writing activity. We reviewed notes of the subjunctive last class. We talked about last class, and actually in the classes prior, how fundamentally you need to have two clauses, a main clause and a subordinate clause. The main clause has a verb, which includes an expression of emotion, such as those at the very bottom of page 30. Those verbs in the expressions of emotions are conjugated in the regular present tense. And then it's the verb in the subordinate clause that's conjugated in the subjunctive according to your subject in the subordinate clause. And the subjects in the main clause and the subordinate clause must be different. And that is what requires the subjunctive and the use of que as well to separate the two. So that we talked about before. This handout that I gave you guys last class is what's due for today. All four activities, and you could watch the daily agenda video from last class that goes into greater detail for how to complete this activity, but very briefly, you are indicating how these verbs are conjugated in the subjunctive. A really helpful resource would be page 14. And in the margins here, it goes over how to formulate the subjunctive, beginning with the present indicative yo form for the examples here provided, and for irregular verbs as well, removing the o ending, and then essentially when doing that, being left with the stem, right? So to formulate your stem, begin with the present tense yo form of whatever verb you're working with, remove the o, and then add to that stem your subjunctive endings as outlined here in the middle of page 14. You also have irregular verbs at the very bottom, and these would be really helpful for how to navigate the first five of this activity. Activity 2, very similar, but you're conjugating the verbs within a particular context, not just standalone. Activity 3, you are indicating as to whether or not the statements are accurate. The phrases are accurate. All the phrases should be in the subjunctive. If they're correct, you're just going to write correcto on the line provided. If they're incorrect, what changes need to be made so that they are indeed in the subjunctive mood. And then activity 4 is a straight translation activity. I don't have the expectation of you being able to do these perfectly. But I do have the expectation that you're going to give a perfect effort. Perfect effort is utilizing your entire linguistic repertoire to date And then for the words you don't know, you can look them up, or if I can be straight up honest, especially the direct objects here at the very end, if you leave it in English, I really don't care. What I do care about is you being able to tell me how these verbs at the beginning would conjugate in the present, because all of these are expressions of emotion. All of these you should be able to find on page 30 of the textbook, or if you refer to your notes, let me pull those up really quickly from the very beginning of the year. And actually, I'll walk you through the steps for how to find those notes, because I think we're getting to the point where we're going to be constantly cycling back to them. If you go in modules, of course, and then we began with review of the preterite and the imperfect, and then if you recall right toward the end of the quarter, usos del subjuntivo, allá está. Usos del subjuntivo. If you open up this document, this PowerPoint, it has the acronym WEIRD, and then for each expression of wish, emotion, impersonal, request, or doubts, for each of those expressions you have commonly used expressions for each, and then examples. So referring to this document, and especially the E, emotions, is where we are right now. So between these notes, which again, usos del subjuntivo, underneath modules, and in the Lección Preliminar, the first initial lesson that we did in the academic year, you can find commonly used expressions there, and then also on page 30. So that's what I really want to see. I want to see you recognizing those expressions that require the subjunctive. How would those expressions be expressed in Spanish correctly? That would be que, and then whatever the verb is, right? The verb to have, the verb to understand, the verb to lie, that I want you to be able to know. And they're all verbs that are utilized earlier in this exercise, so it's not like you're having to fish them out of nowhere. And express those verbs in Spanish. Anything that comes after that, soccer, the truth, the gym, trash, I really don't care. You can leave that in English. I just want to see that you recognize how to compose the subjunctive. That you guys are going to submit for homework for today. And then back to the agenda, the last couple of things we have. We have a game to play called Juegos de Dados, dice game. We played a game similar to this with your 10 wishes, if I recall correctly. I'll pull up the assignment right now. Ahí está. So, to play this game, you do need a pair of die, or just one dice. You're going to roll the dice twice. The first time you're going to roll the dice is to identify one of these expressions. Actually, to begin, I want you to express what they are in Spanish. I don't know why they give them to you in English here. ¿Cómo se dice I'm happy? Page 30. You could say estoy feliz. That works. But another way to say it is me alegra. Me alegra que. It's a reflexive verb. Me alegra. And actually, technically not reflexive. I don't know why they... Me alegra. So it would be like molestar or gustar. Not reflexive technically because it's something else making you happy. Not you making yourself happy, if that makes sense. Anyway, me alegra would be this first expression. Me sorprende. Me sorprende, again referring to expressions provided here in page 30. There's the verb sorprender. A lot of these verbs begin with me. They require indirect object pronouns when we conjugate them, like gustar, me gusta, like molestar, me molesta. Me sorprende means it surprises me or I'm surprised. You guys know I like. me gusta. I'm bothered. Me molesta. I'm worried. Can be done a few ways. Could be temo. Could be tengo miedo. Me preocupa. Me preocupa. Or estoy preocupado. A lot of ways you can say I'm worried. And then I fear would be kind of synonymous. The verb temer. Yo temo. Or yo tengo miedo de. So those are the expressions you're going to use at the beginning. And based on how you roll the first dice, will determine which of those expressions you're going to use here in the first part of the chart. And then you're going to roll the die a second time. And then all of these, the subject is in the to form. I don't know. When we do this together, I may want to switch it up a little bit because everything always in the to form, I think will get a little boring. I may add another element here. We may add another element here of changing the subject from not to, but from another subject. Matter of fact, I think, 1 through 6, we can just choose different subject pronouns. You get a 1. That's the yo form. Actually, the yo form wouldn't work because you have the subject pronoun being the same on both sides. I don't know. We'll figure it out when we do it together. If we can just stick to what's provided here, you're going to roll the die a second time, and in rolling the die a second time, figuring out which of these 6 verbs you're going to use, conjugating that verb in the subjunctive in the to form. So for example, if I roll a 1, you're going to begin here by saying me alegra, I'm happy. And then rolling the die a second time, 2 would be toser mucho. The verb toser in the subjunctive would be tosas. Tosas. T-O-S-A-S. If I roll the die for, again, 6, for example, 6, yo temo. And then the second time I roll the die, a 3. Yo temo que tú duermas en clase. Remember, dormir a stem changer. Duermas. If I roll the die again and roll a 5, I'm worried. Estoy preocupado. Me preocupa. And then I roll a 4. Que tú vayas al hospital. So, conjugating the verb in the subjunctive according to the subject, which is always going to be to, and then writing the expression of emotion there at the very beginning. That you're going to submit in Canvas, and then the other thing you're going to submit in Canvas is this handout that we were beginning in class. And there are 2 parts to this, a few parts to this that I would like you to do. The first part, starting with the beginning, is to finish what we had initially started last week. Here, for the first page, you are indicating the problems that you see in these pictures. Perfect effort. Don't expect it to be done perfectly. I expect it to be done with a perfect effort, with academic integrity. Begin with an expression of emotion, and a lot of these are fundamentally negative because we're talking about problems. So begin with an expression of emotion. Es una lástima, es ridículo, es terrible, followed by que, and then followed by whatever active verb that you see here. So for example, I think we did be together, contaminar. Es una lástima que las fábricas contaminen el aire. Right? So utilizing this vocabulary at the bottom to begin, utilizing the vocabulary on pages 20, 21, and 22, indicate what the problems are. And then at the same time, for the opposite side of this paper, again, you only have to do 4 in total. Choose one of the solutions and utilize the expressions of suggestion, and then the active verb that you see in the picture, conjugate that action in the subjunctive. We did the top portion of the second page of the packet. For more guidance on how to complete that, you could watch the daily agenda video from the previous class from last week. But essentially just formulating the subjunctive here, including que in between your expression of emotion and then the subject of the subordinate clause. Que would go right after that initial expression, and then the active verb would be conjugated according to the subject that's provided there. Second, what I want you guys to do in the space provided here at the bottom, and you can do this on either side. You don't need to fill out both sides, just one or the other. Take the letter that we were looking at last class. I want you to identify 3 problems that are highlighted here in the example letter to a company. Identify 3 problems here and then express them using the subjunctive mood. So identify the problem, and then essentially what I would like you to do is utilize the expressions on the front of that first handout, these expressions to indicate the problem. You're going to do that for 3 problems discussed in the top of the paragraph. And then identify 3 solutions, but utilize the expressions that are provided on the second page. Utilize the expressions of suggestion to indicate what the possible solutions are. 3 problems, 3 solutions, and you're going to write those in the space provided here at the very bottom. And it could be either side.